And we're live. Hello, folks. Thanks very much for joining us. If you're out there in YouTube land tonight, we'll just wait for a few to hit the lobby coming over from the episode, but I think everything seems to be going okay here. Got a wee register on the sound, but if anybody can let me know if you can hear me okay, that'd be great, just as usual. And once again, thanks very much for joining me tonight. Oh, it's a bit stormy here, I have to say. It's been lashing down all day. Very wet, very stormy, very autumnal. Not getting much of a chance to get the dogs out, I have to say. So, but yeah, thank you very much for joining us. As usual, hello, Joseph. How's it going? Hello to everybody there. If you have any questions on tonight's episode or anything to do with Dune, anything to do with the Jungian approach that Frank takes with the Dune series, all things science fiction as usual, folks. So fire away if you do have any questions. Hi, Miles. Thanks for joining us. I've got a couple of wee things to remember to chat to you about tonight, actually, as well. Let me see very quickly. Science fiction thing. But scribble that down. I've been trying to get my ink pen to work to get the ink must flow in the question for the last 20 minutes there. So, Joseph Smith, my question's about format. Fire away, Joseph, anything at all? Go ahead. Format, IMAX or regular? Joseph, I'm in Northern Ireland, very few IMAX cinema. In fact, sorry, I think one only, possibly, if that many. But I won't be able to. It looks like I won't be able to see it on IMAX at all. It's not. There's not many of those kind of cinemas around here. So, at the minute, as we've been talking about, well, let's see. So that's just in terms of what if I'm going to see it, it'll have to be on a regular cinema. Does IMAX actually present a better quality? I honestly don't know. Based on what I've just been saying to you, Joseph, if I'm in Northern Ireland, so the point I'm trying to make is I've never seen a film on IMAX. So I know that must sound pretty sad and pathetic, but it's true. Joseph says I'm about 100 miles away, but I want to know if it's worth it. Sad. Yeah, I mean, I think, I would have to go down south possibly to see a film and on IMAX. I'm not 100% sure. Excuse me. But I'm not the person to ask. I have never seen it. Never. Not one film on IMAX. Not one. Honestly. It's just the local cinema for me. And over the last few years, I suppose the hours that I work and the times that I keep really prevent me from going to see quite a lot of cinema, to be honest, which is I think I've been saying this the other night, actually. When I was young, we had to go quite some distance to go to the cinema, and I certainly made it to the cinema a lot more often when I was younger, But no, genuinely, I've never seen an IMAX film. And from what I can see, you're just going to get more, if you see what I mean. The impression I get is a normal size cinema, then the expanse into the larger type of screen to suit that. I think is it a 70mm film? I'm not too sure. Shock, lack of specs with faith. Oh, it's just that Northern Ireland's in some ways a modern country, in many ways it's not. It's not a particularly big country. So, but yeah, it's. I'm not too sure, but I've had a nosy and I couldn't find one. So there may be one at the Odyssey. Excuse me, in Belfast. Which isn't horrifically far away. It's about 50 miles from here, but nothing much within a reasonable rate. Certainly not within a normal radius. I think it would take a trip to another country to see it on IMAX, Joseph. So I mean, I'm not too bothered, to be honest. But I'd be happy enough with a decent enough size TV if it comes to it. The whole cinema thing here is looking a bit dodgy in terms of safety. And I've yet to check in with the local cinema to see if they're going to maintain their safety regime or else ignore government advice, which is kind of just let everybody in, kind of act as if nothing's happening, Miles says, this might be my mental exercise. Jung was heavily influenced by Nietzsche's ideas, name the superhuman, and other ideas about mankind's evolution as a society. Nietzsche was influenced by Dostoyevsky and we'll catch up with the rest when you hit your 200 character limit. I think the very interesting thing, Miles, whenever we'll get the rest of your thread here, is that I think it's very clear that Jung's ideas are borrowed from Samuel Butler. uh, which is interesting, particularly the collective unconscious. Oh, right, okay, so let's just run that thread together, Miles. So this might be my mental exercise. Jung was heavily influenced by Nietzsche's ideas, namely superhuman and other ideas about mankind's evolution as a society. Nietzsche was influenced by Dostoyevsky on the human mind and his psychological explorations of the characters. Do you see any influence of Frank Herbert from Dostoyevsky? Oh, I haven't read much Dostoyevsky. I think I've hardly read any, to be honest. Trying to think what I have read. I couldn't comment, to be honest. I'm the wrong person there. It's just honesty. I've read a lot of stuff, Miles, but I can't really comment there. I think Frank takes influences from a lot of places. But in particular, this section was showing you Frank talking about himself, how he uses Jungian mandalas and so on to construct, build. It's particularly the Jungian stuff. It's about building character. Excuse me, and get the characterization right. Using it to create pairings within the Dune series, and particularly works with these different archetypes. I honestly don't know. I mean, Frank's wanting to have literary chops, and if he's read Dostoevsky, then I would imagine that would be an influence on him. I think a lot of science fiction writers are very heavily borrow from other places and then bring that stuff into science fiction. So it's it could be quite possible, Mez. I would argue that if you know a good bit about Dostoevsky and that you've seen those elements in Frank Herbert's work, if you're familiar with Dostoevsky's work, then if you can see elements of that in his work, then that probably is the case, So sorry I can't answer your question fully there. Joseph says, I'd watch it on a train station, black and white, if that's what we have to. I'm going to have to read Butler, says Joseph. Thank you very much. It's my wife bringing me a much needed cup of Joe. Thanks, love. Oh, that's scalding hot. So yeah, but Butler's the collective unconscious is in Butler. It's in the Erewhon, and it's one of those things that we hit. That we I mean, to be honest with you, it's kind of what Herbert does. You kind of almost presented the idea of the Butlerian jihad and all of that stuff as kind of Frank's idea, and it's not. Excuse me. Frank really does borrow heavily from a lot of other writers. He doesn't like letting you know where he borrows from, I think. And I'd say that if you ever look at George R.R. Martin's is it A Song of Ice and Fire books, I mean, they're heavily borrowing from all sorts of stuff. But you can take pieces of this, pieces of that, reframe it, and Bob your uncle, you've got something new, I suppose. I used to be an examiner for an awful long time. It's kind of a common thing in plagiarism, if you see what I mean. I'm kind of very good at spotting it, where we'll take someone else's work, reframe it in a wee bit of a way, change a couple of things, that kind of thing, I fully expected tea, which is what I'm having, says Joseph. I'm one of probably a few Irish people. I can't stand tea, Joseph. And I'm pretty eclectic in food and drink, but I just don't like tea. What writer does like to share their influences? I don't know. I think there are a few that do, particularly when writing certain things. It depends on the kind of literature that you're writing. But I think I was talking about Philip Jose Farmer, for example. We were having a chat the other day, by the way. No tea for the Irishman. God, coffee's good. Excuse me. We were having a wee chat the other day. I think I talked about all the different reading material that Philip Jose Farmer's Riverworld series led me to. And that it led me to Richard Francis Burton. It led me to read about the real Alice in Wonderland, Alice Little. It led me to read Lai Po and Tu Fu to find out a bit more about John de Longford. And, it got me looking at lots of people who are historical people. And I think I was telling you the other day, by the way, guys, this is just a wee quick mention. I think I was telling you about these kind of poems. It was to do with no ships and what you learn from something not being there. And I think the poem was something like, I went to the mountain the other day to meet the wise man. He was not there. I learned many things. And I think I was saying that I was pretty sure it was a pretty common type of poem in Chinese literature. And I wasn't sure where I got my source from, but we were talking about lipo, and I don't know if we can get the light to stop reflecting on that a bit better. There we go. We'll go that way. Lipo and tofu, and I actually thought I'd quickly have a wee check. And it is indeed actually from lipo. I think that I got this from it, but it's known as the visiting a hermit and not finding him. That's the type of poem. It's a very common theme in Chinese poetry, and there's a few of them here actually to start with. So I was just kind of giving you very much a paraphrasing, but that kind of thing where actually that kind of story is actually opening you up to another writer's influences and stuff like that. I think it's really good, you know. So it does happen, and I think particularly. If you're thinking about a good writer who does that, I'd point to Dan Simmons. I picked up my first Dan Simmons book because of something I was reading in school, and the title of his book, which was Carry on Comfort, was the title of a poem I was reading in school at the time by Jared Manley Hopkins. One of these sonnets of desolation, really miserable things, and that's what actually got me into reading Dan Simmons. And his books in particular use a lot of intertextuality to work within the stories, and because of that, they actually lead you to other writers. And he's doing this very deliberately, you know. So some writers really do point out their influences and actually let them flow over their work, and are quite honest about it, even to the point of making their authors, you know, characters. But there we go. Joseph says, "Sounds wise." Yeah, the whole learning something by something not being there. I think there's quite a bunch of poems there. I was reading them last night. I'll not go and start reading a bunch of ancient Chinese poetry to you, but they are variations on that kind of thing, and they're very enjoyable, and quite a lot of them are quite detailed. You know, Man says the relation that I see is Paul Atreides being like the main character from Crime and Punishment, in which the person itself is a very different while pursuing a goal and after. It's very different while pursuing a goal and after achieving it. Both of them are highly disappointed and sad at the end. It was complicated for Paul to go down the golden path. Okay, Miles. Yeah, thank you for fleshing that out there. That's a good point. I think it's a common. What we're doing here, Miles, is we're setting up. This isn't my opinions on psychology or Jungian ideas or Lord Raglan's steps of the hero. What we're particularly looking at is this is the stuff that Frank looked at and Frank used and worked with. So there are big gaps in Frank's understanding of classical mythology, for example. And you know, he's a researcher, but he's a generalist in that sense. He brings stuff in, and he'll read around the subject. And how you can read information back then is quite different than you can today, I suppose. How you can get a hold of information. I'm a bookish person, so books have always been a source of information for me, but there's so many resources these days. But in terms of the hero, really, if what we think of as Greek heroes, for example, and you can take your pick: Perseus, Heracles, Jason, Achilles. Take your pick. They all have a bad end. It doesn't go well, and I can't think of a hero in Greek mythology who has a good end. So as much as, for example, somebody was talking to me about the Jason and the Argonaut film, going, that's really good. You know, that's the Jason and the Argonaut myth. It is up until a point. It's if you want to draw a line in the sand and give them a happy ending, go no further than that line, if you see what I mean. But what happens afterwards is pretty horrific. I suppose what you're saying, Miles, is that with the hero's journey, I mean, like the main character from Crime, which the person itself is very different while pursuing goal than achieving it. So that we all have a kind of before, middle, and after, if you like, and how we go about our business, in a sense, is interesting. But it is there's a transformative process to the hero, and it's a fundamental part, I think, of. I mean, really, what these guys do are pretty much breaking down sort of literary approaches into systems or mythological, or particularly with mythography. Were you already familiar with Jung's work before reading Dune? Yeah, enough as I need to be, I suppose. Went to one of those campuses in university that. But yeah, I'm a kind of one of those people that's. I think psychology. It works in certain ways, I suppose, and I can be critical of it as a scientific approach. Will we say? But I was a reasonably aware of Jung and Freud and the whole shebang actually. Um, so I've had some practical experience with people in my family, that kind of thing, in terms of counselling. So no, quite aware of it. And I worked with counsellors and actually help. Used to provide learning support for a classroom full of counsellors, pretty much. So yeah, no, I had, yes, quite reasonably familiar with a lot of that stuff actually, and even counselling techniques and different approaches and stuff like that within, and psychology, psychoanalysis. But it's not a field that I am. Even psychology would imply the study of the soul if we break the word down. But so it's I think it has its uses, but I think it would need to tidy up its scientific method massively. But when we're dealing with people, I don't think there's any shoe that fits all, if you understand what I mean. And like all things, that can be often a problem. But my particular thing with you've probably heard me talking about it, is this fascination by the Jungian schools and the Freudian schools, particularly with classical mythology, and almost these two schools are built up around what you would call an iconotropic approach to myth. And iconotropy, we talk about a fair bit in this, folks, as you'll see later, it's not deliberate, but it can be a deliberate or accidental misinterpretation of mythology. And I think that informs a lot of psychological work that uses these myths, because they haven't investigated. I'm working away tonight, folks, I'm doing an episode for the station on the body of I'm doing it on the Pelopids from Greek mythology, which is the family line of Paul Atreides would be a Pelopid, if you see what I mean. If he's descended from Agamemnon, then he's also descended from Pelops, and therefore he's also a descendant of Tantalus. So I'm doing a little program to show you how that genealogy works. I was writing away at it today. It was fast. My main problem is I don't, if I want to be accurate enough, there are many versions of almost every myth, and in particular in the ancient world, they share local flavor, I suppose. So there are many. Odysseus doesn't end up okay, Keith. Odysseus is murdered by his son. There you go. So it depends if you know the Iliad and the Odyssey, and that's kind of what survives of the Cypriot. There are elements to the story, there are fragments, and there's also, as much as those works don't, we have elements of the story that continue. So generally, Odysseus is, I do believe he's murdered by his son, but killed by his son, but it's not Telemachus. I think it's his child by what you can call Circe or Kirke. But yeah, writing away at it, Joseph says, I can't wait for that bit. I'm enjoying writing it enormously, and I'm having to really restrain myself. So I'm trying to cover as many of the versions of the myth. If I start talking to you about Tantalus, there's a couple of people it could be. Pelops, his mum is one of 4 people, dad one of 2 people. It depends on where the myth comes from. Pelops himself is either a son of Tantalus, or he's a bastard with no father that's raised by Tantalus, or, for example, he's could be a son of Atlas and the nymph Linus. So Pelops himself has 3 different potential parenting problems. So I'm getting there, folks, but I don't want to swamp you with myriads of variable myths, but that's what mythology is like. Unfortunately, and particularly the general approach, the systemic approach, what this kind of idea of the monomyth is exactly that. I think. Excuse me. So no, if you approach myth properly, you have much more fun with it as well, and you learn a lot more about it. You've got to work with evidence, and there are all kinds of evidence, many of which survive. let me just catch up, folks. So sadly, Keith, Odysseus didn't end up okay. But if you read the epics, of course, death comes for us all in the end, and down to Hades they go. Let me just catch up with your questions, folks. Joseph says, I want to ask about Duncan's drunk scene. That was a planned act or genuinely foolish? It doesn't. I think it's presented as not being out of character, but it does seem stupid, strange at that point in the book. I thought it could be staged. In fact, based on what you know of the situation and Duncan's character, I would argue that it was staged. When things are, when the hoo-ha's about to hit the fan, so on and so forth, you're not about to go out and get sloshed and leave yourself useless in terms of your own senses. So it's a good question, Joseph. I don't know what you guys think, but it seemed staged. But I don't think it's, it's one of those things that we don't get to find out. But I don't think he's really drunk. It's good, but it could go either way, I suppose. Miles says, don't worry about the other questions, just wanted to share that. Not at all. Please share your thoughts, guys. I know it seems sometimes this seems a bit of a one-way conversation to me, but the more you guys engage, I think the better quality of banter and insight that we get. And I try to make it not too heavy or anything like that, fingers crossed. But no, any questions are fine. And as I said, it's I'm enjoying reading. I'm just sort of working with Apollodorus and Robert Graves's, because they've got multiple sources within them. So I'm just trying to really sort of get a combination of the different things and get that family line properly down for you. Really, it's because there is a lot of misunderstanding about the curse in particular, and the curse of the House of Mat is not the curse of Tantalus. They're different things, But yeah, I was actually thinking about the whole thing, and it made me think of other connections that I've found with this and Dune. So I'm going to try and maybe fill out that episode with, and it is to do with the same families actually, but it's some stuff to do with Helen of Troy, or sorry, Helen of Sparta, as she's known at that time. Let me just catch up, folks. So yeah, Keith. Sadly, I can't think of a Heracles is poisoned by his wife. Jason, the ship, falls on his head after all his kids are killed. That kind of not one of them has a good ending. And it's the same for most of these kind of traditional heroes, if we want to call them that. So man says, when Paul describes the powers he got as a Kwisatz Haderach, he talks about a giving force and a taking force. Was that also aligned with the archetypes, or is there any other reading about it? Excuse me. Yeah, this is one of the things I understand very well. Miles, it's to do with being a carer, I suppose, if you understand what I mean. You can give of yourself to someone and to somebody who has to take of it. If you understand what I mean, it's that kind of relationship. For a carer to give too much is damaging to themselves. And this is kind of what Paul's talking about at that moment when he talks about I am the giving force, and that we'll talk about that a fair bit. At the same time, taking too much, there's a dependency kind of thing. So there has to be, it's a point of being in that kind of sense, a giving and taking relationships exist all over the world, if you like, and in real life. In terms of how it aligns with the archetypes, absolutely, because the archetypes are kind of presented as, particularly with the idea what he talks about, the Jungian mandalas and shadings and so on. He's using them to balance out and equate his characters, and even within the Jungian mandalas, I'll show you a few in a wee minute here. I've actually, just to show you, in terms of my research, looking into Jung, if we're going to talk, I don't know if there's a white book, sorry. If you're going to look at Jung, you might as well go straight to the horse's mouth, I think. So this is the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Carl Gustav Jung, and I think that's hang on, sorry, taking the specs off. Let me see. I think out of all of his works, is that the third volume or something? And this is a second edition. So it's a lovely book. And I'll just do this now. Actually, I'll show you what we mean, because it has a bunch of these Jungian mandalas in it. Well worth looking at. You'll see the how the you can absolutely see how this influences Frank Herbert. I'll just see if I can hold them up a wee bit so you can see them. And you can see, of course, the worm serpent up there and so on. The map of Arrakis is a mandala. There again, you start to get a sense of this, and the use of color, separation, and there's symmetry and asymmetry to these things. And once again, so if you can imagine, he's using these as a visual guide to maybe set up his characters, pairings, points on a wheel, opposites. And I think these are all Jung's himself. They're lovely. That's the one. That's the one from the That's the normal edition of the book. Actually, you'd see that on the cover. I think mine's more of an academic copy. And just see if there's anything in particular. But yeah, particularly this kind of thing here. If you see what I mean. And there's shadings of a few things in Jung's work. But we get a lot of as I said, we get a lot of this. We get people playing around in, I suppose, places that aren't their pools. Trying to provide a good euphemism. Great read, and how people look at myth, I suppose. There is bear with me 1 second, folks. There's a really, really great book on folklore. Sorry, not folklore. It's fairy tales. Bruno Bettencourt, I think is his name. And I usually keep it around here, but I think it is actually downstairs. And I would argue it's a very good book to pair up with having a look at Jung's archetypes. And archetypes are kind of part of almost what you would call systemic thinking. To say that this is it, everything fits archetype, you might as well say stereotype in some cases. But there are particular myths, again, that within this world, and they fall down within certain things. And to say that I'm a person that doesn't fit into patterns. And if you go, everybody must be this, and everybody must be that, and everybody must be that, and I think we've got everyone covered, I guarantee you I'll be the one person standing there on their own. There's always exceptions to every rule, and I think that kind of approach to myth. But I think their understanding of mythology has cultural bias, if you understand what I mean. And it really, we're talking about Greek mythology, and if you understand the importance of the classical world's culture to what you call Western civilization, all Western civilization is based on the idea of the classical Greek culture. So in that sense, it's very important. I mean, the different approaches to myth, as I said, but particularly within psychology and the psychoanalytical field, I'd argue that proper mythographers who are maybe in, say, a historical, classical, archaeological field would look at it and go, And as I said, if you read what we just talked about, you go, tell me what the Oedipus myth is. Which one? Which local variation would you like? There's Oedipus cults at Athens, for example. Oedipus is the king of Thebes. If you start to see what I mean, you can't go, oh, there's that Oedipus myth. That tells me everything I need to know about Oedipus. And particularly with Freud getting it hilariously wrong. But there are many shades and variations, local flavors. Greece isn't a country. It's a place full of little villages and poli, little city-states. There's a sort of pub quiz a wee while back, and the question that the quizmaster asked was how many countries participated in the first Olympic Games, and everybody wrote their answers down, and my answer was 0, which was the correct answer. But he was so annoyed with me, he gave me the microphone and asked me to explain it to everybody, so I did. Greece there is no such country as Greece back then. It's a collection of cities, little city-states. So how many countries take part in the first Olympics? 776 BC. The answer is none. So it's one of those kind of things. Nice. Sorry, let me just jump back to the where we were running with that thread. I think I've lost my thread of thought. So Paul describes the powers he got as a quiz at Sarah. Oh yes, the giving and taking force. Yeah. So I think that's what got me onto that wee bit. But yeah, I do understand it, and I think when Paul's talking, you can give too much of yourself to someone, and you can take too much of someone as well. So there we go. Joseph Smith says, my psych prof was a big fan of mythology as well. And back to the fight, I felt it was staged. So, Miles, yeah, you do understand, Miles. Thank you. I guess the only thing I do not grasp entirely is why the awakening of the collective unconscious, why the Bene Gesserit taking the water of life would only reach to the unconscious of the female side, and why, in the case of the males, they all died instead of awakening their collective unconscious. I think there's a suggestion that why the males all die is a hint of it in Erewhon. I think that they don't have the wherewithal. Drives them mad, they die, that kind of thing. But taking the water of life is all about being able to change the poison at a molecular level inside your body. And if you can't figure out how to do that, the poison kills you anyway. But yes, the one thing that doesn't really make sense is if there is what's called a race memory, a genetic memory, a collective unconscious, why is it male and female separated? And I suppose that's to do with slight differences, possibly in things like mitochondrial DNA or something like that. But I don't think Frank's knowledge on that's particularly good. And it is a point that kind of doesn't make sense. The only way I would suggest it does make sense, if we were suggesting the other night, is that possibly there are no humans in the universe, and that they're all kind of artificially constructed humans in a way by some sort of machines from the Butlerian Jihad, and it's possibly something like that they didn't get it quite right, and hence the women can only see the female line because there's only females back that way. I suppose it doesn't really make sense, and I personally don't. The collective unconscious, this idea of and separated, of course, from a personal unconscious. I find it kind of weird to say, but I'm a person who has almost no subconscious. I'm known for my thoughts translate very quickly to word, just instantly. I don't tend to have a separation, but it's because of the way I sleep. I hardly sleep at all, and I can't fall asleep. I'm either asleep or I'm not. It's as simple as that. So I tend to wake up with instant thoughts and stuff. It's a bit of a problem, I suppose. My wife would say, but it's I don't really have much of a subconscious processing, I think, and again, I'm an odd thing, There's all sorts of people out there whose brains work in sort of slightly different ways, But why the awakening of the collective unconscious? Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. And of course, then you get kind of the where he takes that, Miles, is actually with Duncan, Idaho, where you get a collective personal unconscious. So he really is mixing it up quite badly there, But there we go. Well, bear with me one wee second, folks. I just want to have a wee quick look at something. But if I can find my history. Let's just have a wee look. I was trying to find the name of that book for you, but I can't. I can't remember the exact title of it, and I keep using kind of what I think the title is, and it keeps producing other things in the search, so I'm not finding it. I actually have a copy of the book on a different laptop, but it's downstairs and it's not charged, so I'm going to definitely get at that for you. Bear with me one wee second. Right. Just going to find something for it. Let's see if I can find this. Goodness, I'm terrible. One wee second, folks. I promise just I'd have a wee chat about something to you today. I'll be darned if I can remember the name of it. Try that one. Aha, got it. Right. Let me just quickly write this down. No, I was just sort of asked to quickly mention somebody, and it's the Atlanta Science Fiction Festival. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. I hope you're all still with me. No, it was just I was going to say that somebody had asked me to. I might be able to participate on like a scholarly panel on all things Dune over at the Atlanta Science Fiction Festival, which was quite a. But I'm looking into it at the minute, so it's not a guaranteed thing. But just thought I'd tell you I had a wee quick look at the Science Fiction Festival there, and I think because of something to do with COVID, that I think you've got the ability to get this in your own home. So it's the Multicultural Sci-Fi Organization, folks. If you want to check it out, their webpage takes you to their festival. I'm sure that you guys in America maybe know about this, but the Atlantic Science Fiction Festival. And I just had a wee quick run through, not regardless of to do with myself, but just had a wee quick run through the films and all, and I haven't seen anything there. And it is a real shebang of what they say on the tin, multicultural new science fiction movies and shorts and stuff. So if you want to check out the website, something that popped up on the radar there. Now, I'll just backtrack a wee bit. So I just wanted to give you the right information. Excuse me. So yeah, the collective unconscious thing really doesn't make that much sense, and it really does speak of the massive influence, I think, of Jung on the Dune series. That man says, not a question, just a comment. I read Dune in my early teens, and eventually I ended up being familiar with most of the topics in Dune. Studied genetics. I'm really fond of psychology. Yeah. Also did some experimentation with psychedelics, DMT from the. It strikes me beyond belief the imagination required for Herbert and the versatility he had to incorporate such topics into it. Sadly, I have to get back to work. Oh, okay, Miles. My last question is, do you believe the golas from all the major characters were used poorly in Brian Herbert's ending for Dune? I think the ending was poor in itself, but it pretty much seemed like everybody was there, if you see what I mean. But I'll say one thing: I'm a not Deus ex machinas when they work have to be put together well. But I tend to find that you do need a godlike being to deal with them. But they're an easy way out. They're a cop out, and I think there's a lot of them in the very end of I think it's 4 or 5 of them maybe at the very end of the the conclusion to the Dune series by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, and the one book that did that to me, Paul. I think everyone they're all and everybody's in the novel. Where I leave, and I have read them only once, just and quickly made some notes to put stuff into this PhD. But where I left, the idea that Skytail has pretty much everybody. And I don't know, it makes you question all sorts of things, like even what's the point of life and stuff. It kind of makes it seem bizarre, and even when it makes death seem kind of pointless too. But yeah, you make a very good point, Miles. I was in London in the 90s, Miles. Do you know the quote? You might be away to work, and if you are, sir, all the best with it. All of the major players were made into goals at the end, but they played a little part. Yeah, it's a decoration, isn't it? It's like the party, everybody's back together again. I don't know if it reminds you of the old sort of kids' annuals, 2080 and Judge Dredd. They tend to have covers with all the characters going, "Hello, Happy Christmas." Everybody's got together, even though they're not quite from the same worlds or universes. But yeah, I think it strikes me beyond belief the imagination required from Herbert, the versatility he had to incorporate such topics into it. It's a very good point. I often tell my students this. A lot of students are told off for daydreaming. I think they've got all sorts of stupid names for it. Procrastinating, take your pick. Procrastinating. Daydreaming is really good for you. It's very good for your brain. And the imagination, I think as a human being, that the strongest skill that you should develop for all of your other skills, regardless of what you want to do in life, is to have a good imagination. To be just use your mind in the way you want to. I think it's really important. It's got a lot to do with individual happiness, I think. So yeah, there we go. Has anybody got any more questions at all? Fire away. So we have all this Carl Jung, the archetypes, particularly the pairings, as I said. And whenever we had that quote about how Herbert uses the Jungian mandalas, he also talks about writing in haiku. And I've actually, and I think in my footnotes there on the video, I actually think I point out I've never seen evidence for this, and it seemed a bit strange, I thought. And so, as much as we say Frank used a lot of Jungian ideas, the archetypes, even the mandalas that we can see in Jung's own book, there's other sort of things there that we kind of wonder what's going on there, if you know what I mean. So yeah, he uses it for different reasons, and I think that there's partly to do with cyclical motifs, but it, as he calls it, shadings, trying pairing off characters on the wheel. If you see there's Paul, there'll be Fate, and as much as on a different one, there's Paul, there's Alia. So a lot of these syzygies and a lot of these archetypes, and the character, they are archetypes, I suppose, and there's quite a bunch more of them than we mentioned there. But I think in particular the one that Frank really uses to keep that cyclical iteration of theme and character is the syzygy, that male-female pairing, or in that sense that dualistic pairing, if you like, because there are male-male syzygies, and the syzygy idea really works with that idea of Janus, this Roman god who looks forward to the new year and back at the year that's come or that has passed, if you see what I mean. So yeah, there's an awful lot of that, and we've got mother archetypes, father archetypes, the hero. We've got that triple goddess there, which is a particular interest, I think. And as I said, we talk about how it's not really revealed that Gaius Helena Mohiam is Paul's grandmother, technically, but that's kind of let slip in the Brian Herbert books, I believe. But it does make sense, and you're looking for that triad, if you like, that trinity, and again we have it with so you kind of have I suppose within that you've got Alia, Jessica, and Mohiam. But later on, I suppose you've also got Alia and Jessica, and you kind of have the Reverend Mother Romano, who gives up. If you see what I mean, and there are patterns to these archetypes within the Dune series. I think the most common one is the syzygy, and he plays with it. So you can see Alia. I think Alia is a great example here. Alia with Jessica. You have Alia with Paul. You have Alia and little baby Leto, by the way. I think are a pairing as well. They're both children in the first book, and the obvious Alia Paul thing, and then of course you've got Alia and the Baron, the mad other memory character, if you like. It is possible for a character to be overtaken by people from other memory, wherein comes the madness. But the whole point about the Baron is he shouldn't be in Alia's memory because he should be part of a male memory, and we often talk about this. People have raised up some ideas. Actually, it's one of those fun exercises to think how could it work. And I think the best one, as we keep pointing, I keep pointing out, the best one I've heard recently is that the Baron's actually not male at all, and that he's a hermaphrodite. And I think because you're applying logic to it, you see how could this possibly work. But the other reason really is that probably Alia is mad. So there we go. So I don't know if we've got anybody with any questions or comments at all. It doesn't have to be on Carl Jung if we don't know too much about him. Again, this is really just to show you the influence on how Frank Herbert, where we're going with this is how Frank constructs his heroes. Excuse me. And then how he's going to teach us a lesson without doing it overtly, I suppose. So if you have any questions, folks, fire away on the influence of Carl Jung on his heroes, on Frank's writing, on the Dune series, Dune movie. I don't know. I don't know if anybody has seen the film. Somebody was asking really about, and I said that I was the one person you can't ask. I've never seen an IMAX film, but I'm assuming it's like an aspect ratio thing where you're just kind of letterboxing and you're seeing more on IMAX than you would on a normal screen, you know. But sadly, we're still counting down to the Dune movie, and I have to say, still watching all the, all the publicity and promotion as it moves around the world is I don't keep an eye on all of it. I think it's got to the point where if you did look at an awful lot of it, you'd catch a fair amount of the film. But it's good to see it moving around, and it's my sense of anticipation for the film is building, I have to say. So I'm trying to figure out when they're going to start advertising or being able to buy tickets in the cinema, but it's not yet, sadly. So I'm just going to get a wee sip of fluids here. So if anybody's got any questions or comments at all, let's see if I missed them. So all major. Yeah, we're just chatting about the ending of the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson conclusion to the series, where you kind of have all your major players from the Dune universe just there as goalies. Excuse me. But I did a wee bit of reading. Yeah, Jung's ideas, I said, you'll find them. Somebody's asking about Jung ideas. There's one of these mandalas here. It's in the book, and it's Jung showing, I suppose, influence upon himself. We were talking about other writers, but it's a mandala from Jakob Boehm's XL Questions Concerning the Soul. From there it is, and that's from 1620. So I think there's all sorts of kind of esoteric messing around with symmetry, in particular geometric forms. There's a few more of these, by the way. Sorry, these are some of the black. These are also Jungian mandalas. Oh, see that blocks out the light in the screen there. Ouroboros there, particularly, again, there's your worm, your serpent, whatever you want to call it. It's not quite an Ouroboros. It's not devouring itself there. But you can see these motifs. This is you could stick. You could use these for Dune covers, couldn't you? Really, kind of, the worm, Shai Hulud. You can use them as Fremen cave art. So there's a lot of them that reminds me on is Escher, to be honest with you, that kind of thing. So yeah, a big. Just so I quickly see if there's any more similar to kind of the Dune thing than etc. etc. So there's very much a mythical element to these, and you see all sorts of stuff like that. There you go. Something of the hieroglyph, and so it depends on what you think of this sort of stuff. And I think also, by the way, there's a good sense there that you can see an example of real world sources here for Jung's mandalas here. So yeah, I suppose that's so. This is volume 9. Sorry, I thought it was volume 3. 9th volume of C.G. Jung's collective writings is devoted to his chief work on the concept of the collective unconsciousness, correlate that of the archetypes. So there you go. As I said, the usually you see the cover of this, usually with this usually the cover of this book, the editions that I usually see, is one of these mandalas, and in fact that's usually what the cover of this book looks like. I think I'll probably put one into the episode. So there you go. So it's really all about ideas from mythology and setting up this framework of the hero, structuring the hero, creating pairings, using the archetypes to flesh out his world and his characters. And you'll see this done in Star Wars as well, for example. There are syzygies, there are pairings, there's the old wise man, the mystical thing, the hero, the mother, the father figure, all of these kind of things. The fool, the trickster. As I said, we see a number of them represented, but Raban's kind of represented as a fool. The Baron's your archetypal villain, but he's also a trickster. He does play with them and match them up a lot, I think, and pair a lot of these kind of archetypes. But yeah, again, getting ready for his hero. So the next episode we're going to be looking at is going to be on Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces that we were talking about just the other day. And you will, but whenever we get to that, you will actually see, if you've watched these episodes and what we talked about with Raglan, looking at this stuff with Jung, then you'll see it in Campbell's work. Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, particularly, the pattern, the cyclical pattern of the monomyth. Oh, excuse me. Is like a Jungian mandala. Excuse me, I need some fluids here. Nearly choked there. So there we go. So there's a logical progression from Raglan to Jung to Campbell. And I said you can take a look at Star Wars. Star Wars is, George Lucas made no secret about the whole, I use this Hero of a Thousand Faces, really. And he just focuses on the nature of that book itself and Campbell's ideas, and never really kind of refers to the fact that they're Jungian, if you see what I mean. Or, so it's pretty much kind of, to me, you would have a natural progression of Lord Raglan to Jung. And actually, I'd throw in, I'd actually throw Samuel Butler in there, in a sense. Really, the Butler to Jung jump is with the collective unconscious. I think you either know about it or you don't, and I think most people don't. And it was okay, wow. So it basically suggests that Jung's not as original thinker as you thought. It's interesting, but yeah, there's definitely like a hop, skip, and a jump, and we talked about reading books together. Some books have natural pairings, if you like. And people often, regardless of what you think of psychoanalysis or psychology, pretty much you've got Jung and Freud, and nobody really talks about anything else. I've yet to hear of a hybrid. But it's the same with Raglan's book and Carlyle's book. They make a good pair. They work together, and you can see work evolving, changing. And it's one of the reasons why you don't dismiss people who write books when they get things wrong, because usually they're not that daft. And it's about their approach sometimes, but sometimes they get things correct, if you see what I mean. There we are. So there we go. So once we move in, tomorrow we're going to look about the Campbellian influence. Campbell is the wrong word. The Joseph Campbell's influence, the Hero of the Thousand Faces on Dune. And I think in particular, this is the episode where you'll hear me discuss. I'll give you my opinion on: is Star Wars a rip-off of Dune? And the answer is no. So I don't know what you think about that. Star Wars, but like what we were talking about, borrows from so many different sources. Brian Herbert talks about that. All the science fiction writers, he said what his dad jokingly called the "we're too big to sue George Lucas." I think the "we're too big to sue George Lucas" club. But I think they're about less than 28 writers or something like that who could all see their stuff in George Lucas's film. And of course, it's the main plot of Star Wars is completely taken from Hidden Fortress by Akira Kurosawa. So it's a hybrid of many things. But the reason why people see the similarity in Dune is because both Frank Herbert, as the author of Dune, and George Lucas, as the author of Star Wars, are both using the monomyth. They're both using the exact same pattern. So to say that one's similar to the other, it's kind of obvious. In fact, you could construct a new film, put your character in, get them to go through, and then you'd have a third film and say, "Oh, that's a rip-off of." No, we're all using the same systemic pattern to create a film or a story that's going to appeal to as many people on a certain level as possible, I think. And that is the goal, if you think about it. Universal appeal, I suppose, because the monomyth, these kind of ideas, and the ideas of the archetypes of the collective unconscious are all preaching a universal ideal, a one system fits all kind of thing, got somebody here saying, Christopher says, "Hi Christopher, I'd love to read the Herbert treatment of Dune, book 4. God Palpatine narrates." You kind of invert the Dune into Star Wars. I've read the Herbert treatment of June book 4. Well, the Emperor. Yeah, the Emperor. If I was rich, I would say, give some money to the shells of his son, son and Anderson. Money, money, money. Yeah. I think, well, if you look at Frank Herbert's warnings about tripods and political systems and that kind of thing, money's your money, government, religion, that's your tripod. Oil, the whole oil thing actually just is interchangeable, I think, with whatever hydraulic thing, No disrespect to that books from me. No worries. I think you're talking about the Brian Herbert ones, yeah. The thing is, I mean, we were talking about this the other day, Christopher. Somebody asked me what was my least favorite character in the Dune series, and I told them I couldn't remember. I think the character's called 3PO. Hi, Chris. You're gaming tonight. Hope you're enjoying your games. Is that role playing or Battlefield or computer, etc.? But yeah, I think Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson's books are a very different animal. That's it. They're quite different, I think the books from the Sisterhood as a whole for me. Is that you're talking about the Bene Gesserit books as well? Yeah, I don't mind the last two books. I think the fact that that's the thing. That is it a last trilogy at the end, or is it? But there's so much left undone. But no, I quite like them. It's so often that you don't get an insight into any of the big. To get an insight into one of the big organizations in Dune, I think is what was good about it. And to deconstruct the sisterhood, maybe. Don't know what you think, but I think they showed themselves as, again, it's sometimes you think of a lot of characters and agencies in Dune as being almost all superhuman. And I, as much as the sisterhood are pretty good, I think it did bring a level of humanity back to them. We get to look at them without the veneer of witches, if you see what I mean, the self-perpetuated lie. A rare time, I was hoping for a major faction protagonist loss. Is that at the end of Toulouse? Yeah. I think the Ixians are pretty much out of the game at that point, aren't they? But again, you don't really see much of them. There's so much you just don't see in the Dune universe at all. It must be a pretty big place, I suppose, There are some major falling down parts, I suppose, but they're kind of hinted at within the Dune universe. But not everybody relies on the Guild for space travel, for example. But yeah, so yeah, it's just one of those things. I think the whole Star Wars Dune thing has been a bit, great content as well. Thank you, Christopher. You heading off, Christopher? Take it easy. I don't think I'm going to stay too long tonight myself. I'm still watching my throat a bit. Again, I've been throwing the cough medicine on me, but you can probably tell I'm still very, very bunged up. So I'm feeling very nasal, and it's just the shift of weather here, and where we live is kind of in a depression anyway. So there we go. So if anybody's got any more questions, I think I'll run on for about another 10 or 15 minutes, if that's okay, guys. If you have anything for me, fire it away. But yeah, it's going to lead into Hero of a Thousand Faces. This book, it's very famous. Do I have a copy sitting about? I don't know. No, probably not. But I should have it somewhere. I think we were talking about it the other day. Oh! Here, tell you what, folks, you're in luck. Funnily enough, what's that? There we go, right in front of me. So there we go. And just based on what we were showing you, if you think about those mandalas and stuff like that, yeah. There we go. You'll start to this is a Jungian book. That's as far as I'm concerned. Heavily influenced by Jung. Classic. It just says on the back, often cited as Joseph Campbell's best book. This classic study traces the story of the hero's journey and transformation through virtually all the mythologies of the world, revealing the one archetypal hero in them all. Originally published in 1949, has inspired generations of students and sold nearly 1 million copies in various editions. So it's inspired a million people to get it wrong. But there you go. People use it. Hello, Ether Prime. Good morning to you, sir. Just joining us. Must be early in the. You're in the Philippines, aren't you? It must be early in the Philippines. So the thing is this, unfortunately, there aren't. They're not all myths are universal. And even just if you understand that, there is an exception to every rule. And so it's not a good. And I think that the talk about there's all these things. That's the return of Jason within there. We talked about the other day where some myths is the Aboriginal myths of Australia, of the native Australians. Not being about individuals at all. And there you go. There's a break of your monomyth right there. That's an entire culture that doesn't fit the monomyth, you see. Ether saying, good morning. Yeah, I fell asleep, but then I woke up and watched your video. I just wish it were longer. But at least I was able to make it here. Thank you very much, Ether. Well, as I said, it's what it is it's all one big long chapter, really, but it's just breaking it up into the sub-chapters. And it's a good way for it to present it to you guys because it makes it a bit more bite-sized. But within every episode, there's a heap load of information, if you see what I mean. And again, maybe I've not explained this to everybody. The little numbers at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that you see in the videos here are all the footnotes, etc. I know they're called footnotes. They're footnotes in my PhD, but I had to make them endnotes in the videos. So they're all the information where we get things is there. This is the book I was telling you about earlier that I couldn't find, by the way. Let me just get it. It's not reflecting. And this is an excellent book. I couldn't recommend this book more to anybody who's interested in fantasy, mythology, fairy tales, folklore, any of that kind of thing. I'd argue that this is an absolute cracking book. Bruno Bettelheim's The Uses of Enchantment, The Meaning and Importance of Fairy Tales. I wonder when this was published. It's I think I need to get a better pair of very, very small print in this one. It's a very detailed book. I couldn't recommend it more. Let me just have a wee look. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, certain things that you should read if you're studying myth. But if you want to study fairy tales, get this book. It's a great book. It's been around for it was first published in 1976, I think. Here, I got it right. First one, Great Britain by Thames and Hudson, 1976, but it's got a copyright on 1975. So it looks at all sorts of different, and it's kind of from a psychological point of view, but where it's done well, I think done very well. Couldn't recommend that book more. And I've had this book since I was about 19. Just one of those things, because I would read stuff like that. And it does things like comparison of fairy tale to myth, comparison of fairy tale to fable, things like that. If you were kind of in the right kind of mind to read mythography about this kind of thing, Campbell's worth reading anyway. But everything he says, pinch of salt. There is no monomyth. That doesn't mean you shouldn't read him. But Bettelheim's that's a great book. Uses of Enchantment. Sorry, The Meaning and Importance of Fairy Tales. You'll find literature. It's under psychology and psychiatry in the thingy there at the back there. So yeah, it's a good from that sense. It's a good pairing, if you see what I mean. Mythology, fairy tales. Myths are a wee bit different than fairy tales. Excuse me. There we go. So, can you read a passage you enjoy from that book? Oh, well, it's it's an academic book. I'm not sure. But see, I like reading introductions. I'll give you a bit from the introduction if you like, Ether. The struggle for meaning. If we hope to live not just from moment to moment, but in true consciousness of our existence, then our greatest need and most difficult achievement is to find meaning in our lives. It is well known how many have lost the will to live and have stopped trying because such meaning has evaded them. An understanding of the meaning of one's life is not suddenly acquired at a particular age, not even when one has reached chronological maturity. On the contrary, gaining a secure understanding of what the meaning of one's life may or ought to be, this is what constitutes having attained psychological maturity. If you see it, I mean, it's that kind of book, but it really does look at takes individual myths really in terms of how we educate children. As a myth, fairy tales aren't particularly nice, by the way. Again, it's a bit like myths. There are many sanitized, and they are for kind of kids, but there's strong lessons in there. If you see what I mean. So it's about up until the modern era, we would use fairy tales in particular to educate our children particularly on dangers and warnings in society and life. Hence the macabre nature of many fairy tales. Yeah, there we go. Ether Prime says, I studied Joseph Campbell's Monomyth series. Yeah, worth having absolutely have a look at. Do you believe in the Monomyth then, Ether? Is the question, I suppose. Brad, let me just catch up. There's Brad. Hi, Brad. My first time through was listening to you talk while at work, so there was a lot of distractions. Listening again for a second, third time has helped a lot. Yeah. I did a wee short video way back introducing these things, and the point was, I suppose, when I actually said this is we talked about this. Nobody's ever done this, but by the way, before I was trying to suggest to you that you're kind of participating in something that's not been done before. These videos are a first, I think. History is when somebody inquires into something, but we think nobody else has ever presented a PhD like this. So it is an outrageous information dump. And as much as, I think there's 520 references in it in total. And if it's original thoughts for me, that doesn't need to be referenced, that kind of thing. But it's just there is so much information. If you think about the poor examiners, they kind of have to read through all that and tear through it in one go. I think it's a great way of presenting it to you, and particularly the difference in being able to add in images, moving images. Excuse me, and particularly images that are absolutely relevant and add massive context to almost anything I'm saying. You can't do that on a PhD. A few pictures in the middle if you like. So yeah, it's a sort of thing, Brad, that if you listen to all of this, I think about it's like 11 and a half hours solid of just massive amounts of information. It's meant to be informative. That's the point. It's meant to give you everything you need to know in terms of these themes, So I know it's a bit. I think that's one of the things that puts people off the work, and it's also one of the things that makes me try to make it more accessible. That because of PhD, you guys are watching a PhD. This should be understandable by anybody, and people would look at it, maybe reading it. I don't want to read that. That's mad, I think it does make it accessible, and I think if you don't have to have a PhD to understand this, you don't have to have a university education to understand it. I think the way I'm presenting it is the way that a PhD should be. It should be accessible. Should be understandable by anyone. It's just there's an awful lot of information, and it just keeps coming. Again, that's what I said. Each 10 minutes of this tonight, if you backtrack and look at what we've told you in those 10 minutes, and then we'll go to the next bit. But all of this stuff, as I said, we're within the hero theme, so it does run together. But I think it allows you to sort of mull over it, and it's a ridiculous amount of information to take in. You wouldn't find many TV documentaries, even if you put all this together and sit down and listen to it over 11 and a half hours, you'll have learned a lot about a lot of different things. And if you consider how much stuff I've taken out of it, Hi, Karen, how's it going? Thanks for joining us. Shadespire is the game D&D Light. Shadespire is the game. Never heard of it, Chris. I'm very out of touch, though. D&D Light. Anything without too many rules, I suppose. Dune was discussed. Only two of us have read the 6 books. John made a face and used a very unflattering reference when the Brian Herbert books were mentioned. Out of the number of you were playing, had some of you read the, say, 4 books or 3 books, maybe, out of the Dune series 1? But yeah, we were talking about that. A few people get put off at different points in the Dune series. Ether says, I see the hero's journey as something that really makes sense. If not believe in it, I have used it a lot when trying to understand characters in novels, movies, and those I discover when writing. Got it, yeah. That reminds me, the fact that he wrote his haiku, then squeezed it back into English is amazing. Well, it would be pretty amazing, Ether. That's my problem with it. I can write flowery words and stuff, and I can write haikus and have done. Um, quite enjoy haikus, but I wouldn't start trying to write this kind of fiction I'll put it into haiku, and then let me see. A haiku for you, 17 syllables in a little short poem. There you go. There's a haiku on haikus. But yeah. So I actually think unless I've actually put a comment on that, and if you look at the references, I basically comment that I have seen no such evidence, is what I will say. Though, as I said, I've never had at the time when I did this, I wouldn't have been able to get it. The notes would have been just discovered, if you see what I mean. I'd heard of them, but there was no way I would have been able to get at them. And we think that I think there's somebody's just done some work on Dune. Bear with me a wee second. Let me see if I can find something. I find some sort of, it was an article. I can't see it at the minute. Funny how you can never find these things. No, I don't want to waste your time, guys, looking for stuff on the net when I'm chatting. I'll see if I can find it again. It's this new paper that's out on. It's I can't read it because it's behind a paywall, and I won't pay for paywalls. But it's pity because it's referencing my work. But it is a cultural look at Dune from a particular cultural influence, which is, we keep talking about how we can see all different cultures and so on inside Dune. I know he has a sense of flowery prose, but I had no idea that was his method. Well, that's what he says. So you don't believe he did? I actually don't. I'll tell you what, Ethan. I'll be very happy to be proved wrong by show me the notes, and I'll believe you. But otherwise, I do understand this about Frank Herbert, and a lot of these guys, they're into self promotion, and and Frank's a deceptive writer. I think he's a deceptive person as well. In terms of that kind of thing, if you see what I mean. No, there's a number of these sci-fi writers are a bit like that. There is a level of self-promotion going on, and I don't know if you know. Like, does anybody know who came up with the 3 laws of robotics, for example? Would anybody like to tell me? If you, I bet, I bet you somebody will say Isaac Asimov. Would I be wrong? The point is, if you asked Isaac Asimov who came up with the 3 laws of robotics, he'd tell you that John W. Campbell Jr. came up with them. If you ask John W. Campbell Jr. who came up with the 3 laws of robotics, he will tell you that Asimov came up with them. And both men have this cyclical lie. One of them came up with them, but they say do you get my point? It's an advertising thing. We all, of course, we know it's Asimov. Once I think Campbell's right, they're Asimov's laws of robotics because he keeps on adding to them. But the whole point is, if you asked them at the time, that was the response. Oh, it wasn't my idea. It was John W. Campbell's. Oh, John W. Was it your idea? No, it was Asimov's. And it's a backward forward self promotion thing, I think. And if you know Asimov, he's the most shameless self promoter in science fiction history. He's really good at it. Just pick any book that has anything to do with him and read the introduction. Usually there's just you're guaranteed a wee bit of self-promotion about some other Isaac Asimov stuff, if you see what I mean. Even when it's collections of other people's works and he's the editor, I think. So no, I personally, it's wrong of me to say that I don't have enough data, which is how I would think about it, Ether. But from the sense of what I think it would be a strange thing to do, from a point of view of trying to write a universal science fiction book in English. haiku's syllabic. There's a meter to it, like all sort of things. It takes effort. I'll tell you what. Tell you something, folks. I saw a thing that I thought, as much as the things that we talk about, somebody had released. Is it Star Wars? Is it like Star Wars in the mode of the Odyssey? I saw this the other day. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. They kind of rewrite bits of Star Wars like Shakespeare, and supposedly somebody's written this as if it's. I think let's write Star Wars as if it was Homer's Odyssey, and I can tip and tap my way through it, and I can tell you that isn't written in Homeric meter. So there you go. It's an iambic pentameter, which would be much more suitable to Shakespeare, but it would be if it was properly a Homeric in Homeric style, I suppose. Homeric meter. It would be a dactylic hexameter. What a pedant I am. Sorry. Ether says, this raises the question, what is the difference between a storyteller and someone who tells tall tales? None. Well, storytellers, aren't they? What does it say? Ether, all writers are liars. You know this one? If you see what I mean. So yeah, it's interesting. Fire away with any questions, folks. All things everything to do with tonight's episode. Jung, the monomyth, the hero's journey. Anything to do with heroes or cultural heroes, I suppose, and all things science fiction-y and Dune. So any other questions, fire them away, folks. Go for it, Ether. As a writer, not. Yeah, I do a bit of scribbling myself, but I had stopped myself writing for about 30 years because I decided I hadn't got enough life experience or talent. But I've started writing again, just briefly. I do know now that I do have experience and I do have the talent. So, but go for it, Ether. As a writer, Oh, you're keeping me in suspense. I'll give you a wee second to type out your thoughts, sir. If anyone else has got any other questions, fire them away. But yeah, the hero's journey does make sense, by the way, because that fear stopped me dead in my tracks for years. It's not about fear. It wasn't about fear either. It's about if I do wish to write a book one day, I'd rather have respect for my craft. And I actually thought my ideas at the time were really good. I have a lot of these stories here on the computer. And I started rewriting the first paragraph of one recently. It was just to help one of my students do a wee bit of creative writing, and I think I blew their mind with it. But no, I'm very happy with my writing skills now. And it is a thing about life experience. I'm a very, very different person than when I was in my early 20s, if you see what I mean. And yeah, it depends. I think anybody can write a story. It's just put it this way: if I've only got one in me, Ether, if I only have one, I want to make it a damn good one. If I'm only going to get one out, which is possible, then I'd rather it be the one they remember me for, if you see what I mean. Not that I particularly want to be remembered, but I'd like to leave an artifact behind me. But fear is the mind killer, Ether, as you well know. It's not. Yeah, so I think you should follow through. Yeah. Oh no, I'm full steam ahead these days, Ether. Life happens to people. Life happens sometimes. Sometimes we put things aside, but we can come back to them. I'm a person that will not let anything go at all. I am entirely tenacious, and I finish what I start to do. And everything that I've set out to achieve in life, I've done it. But as I said to you, my goals are modest, and I understand that if you make your goals modest and understand yourself well, then you'll achieve them. Oh, my big dog Holly's snoring here, but they'll not happen themselves, I suppose. The work is required. But thank you for that, and keep at your. I know you had a question as a writer there. You're far away with it, but yeah, it's about putting thought into things and other things to do. I wanted to rock for 10 years, if you see what I mean. Sometimes the music comes in. I am literally a polymath and a person who's had so many different. Just keep doing things. I like difference. I've reached 42. Age of life, the universe. Answer to life, the universe, and everything. So I feel that I've learned enough. I've gone through 2 of the 3 stages. I'm a father. I've travelled the world. Feel ready. Groovy. Yeah. Plenty of good young writers as well. it depends on what you want to write, what you want to bring to the party, I suppose. All writers are liars. As Empedocles' paradox, is that all Cretans are liars. Do you know this one, Ether? It's a paradox that's used commonly in science fiction. You probably remember the classic Star Trek episode where they try to baffle the robots. And listen very carefully. I'm telling the truth now. All humans are liars. That's Empedocles' paradox, if I'm not mistaken. So the point is that he says that all Cretans. Listen very carefully. I'm telling you the truth. All Cretans are liars. And of course, he is a Cretan. That's the point, by the way. He is a Cretan. So is he telling a lie or is he telling the truth? And you get paradox. And interestingly, we talk about one of the reasons why I come at Dune the way I did. And if you understand me, I come at Dune from 3 different approaches, but I am a classicist, the whole hero thing. I'm a computer systems guy. So the whole systemic thinking, the whole warning about systemic thinking, it's very obvious to me, if you see what I mean. And I guess the environmental issues, but there's a fair amount of my skills that kind of suited me to actually approach this, something like June. If you see what I mean, you don't just pick any other thing to be a PhD. It kind of has to fit you. And that's why I went for it. Oddly enough, what you're talking about, Ether, is the PhD that I did nearly go take up. I was offered another one, and I was going to look at. It was to be an examination of the Toynbee Cully as the oldest vernacular epic in Western saga literature and its relationship to the Homeric epics. And there you go. If anybody wants a PhD title, I just gave you one. That's the one I never did because you put in more than one application. And I got interviewed for that over here by the wrong people at the wrong campus in the wrong university for the wrong subject, and it was appalling. Which is why I remember I was telling you that I should never have done this June thesis, the June PhD. It was my second. It was my backup to the other thing, and I actually got offered that other one at the Open University, but would have had to have gone and taught in Milton Keynes. And unfortunately, my mum wasn't very well, so I decided to stay at home and do it here. Unfortunately, but there we go. Lily says, "Hi, Lily. Asimov was a technically better writer as his stories had no romance or violence, but Herbert had more depth and scope, many more layers to his stories. They're both great." Yeah, I think Asimov, as you say, technically better writer, and I think Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke they're good writers, but they're ideas machines. That's how I would call. I think of them as idea machines, and they really are scientists. And I think as time goes by, their writing improves quite a bit, actually. One of my favorites by Asimov would be Nightfall, Lily, which is one of his short story. I've got Nightfall 2 here, but I've never read it. And why is it? Give me 1 wee second here. I don't know why I can't. There we go. Whenever I've been trying to get your chat, I've been trying to figure out why I'm missing things. It shows me the top chat, but doesn't show me the live chat. And every time I go to click it, it's off. It's hidden behind something here. So by the looks of it, I'm quite probably missing quite a bit of what you are asking, folks. I do apologize. I've just figured out that I clicked it. I don't have to see it to bring it up. So I've got the live chat here. Oh, that's a bit annoying. I generally do my best to answer all of your questions. If anybody have I missed any of your questions or comments, I do apologize. Type them out again. I'll have a go at them. Ether says, "I disagree, Larry. Asimov's a different kind of writer. I agree. It's hard to read despite how much their ideas were great." Yeah, there is. I think the Bicentennial Man is Asimov. I've got a nice hardback of that downstairs. I think it's quite sentimental. But they churn out so much. That's the thing with Asimov that it's a bit like I suppose the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson And Frank Herbert sort of paradigm there that we were talking about, that one man takes 5 years to write one of the books and they take 30 days. And you can work that out, in terms of quality, how much time you put into something. One of the things it's what there is a part what they call the engineer paradigm, I suppose. But a bunch of these guys were scientists and engineers, and all of the big four, who of course have been Frank Herbert's been relegated out of the big four, for someone's own career reasons. I think that's it, no other reason. It's to do with book sales, really, is what the big four is about. But the three of them are scientists, stroke engineers. Herbert's the only one who isn't. I think I pointed out way back in my introductory video, I think Herbert's the least productive of the four, though he is the only one who's technically a professional, comes from a professional writing background, if you like. But Herbert lied to get his I think like a lot of people did at the time, he lied about his age to get his paper job. But yeah, so there's a lot of science fiction like that. It's just not brilliant prose at all. They're a bit plotting. They're quite short to the point. Here's a wee idea, and we kind of trying to find them a wee bit interesting because the ideas are quite. Oh yeah, I'll give you a good example, Lily. One of my favorite stories, and I don't know how well you'd think it's written. There's no particular fleshing out of character. It's a good example of this kind of thing. Arthur C. Clarke's An Ape About the House. If you ever get a chance, it's a very short story. Have a wee read at that if you like, Lily. It's a good example of that, but it's not badly written. It's not brilliant, but it's a very funny story. Not obviously, just at the end. It is what I call, put it down, make you think, and then I see what he was. You know what I mean. So I think Clarke's a better observer of human nature, I think, and Asimov, I think Asimov is a bit of an egomaniac, to be honest with you. I wouldn't maybe take it that far, egomania, but I think he's a bit of an egotist. Let's see. Well, sorry, he's passed away now, I suppose. Brad says the funny thing about the length of the history of the Dune books is that even though it seems that length is only half the time it'll take for Voyager 2 to travel to the next star. Yeah, scale. I often remind people that there's a scale to life that's way, way beyond what they like to think about. Ether Prime says Asimov is a product of his time. It is like reading an info dump instead of a well-crafted story utilizing themes, interesting characters, etc. I lied about my age in the 90s to get my first job at a graphic design company at 15. I knew how to use computers to create artwork at a time when almost no one did. Yeah, it's one of them common things, often the whole, I suppose at the turn of the century, last century, was people lying about their age to get into the army kind of thing, to do their bit for king and country and go get themselves slaughtered for a pair of yahoos, basically. But yeah, I've read a lot of Asimov over the years to the point where a lot of it's forgetful. I've read all the robot stories, got and I really do like them. I think they're really good. You'll get more of a sense of that they're kind of framed as almost legal dramas, as I would point out, But The Complete Robot's quite good by Asimov. Yeah, I quite like him. I've liked Asimov a lot over the years, and I think his influence, particularly because he's been around for a long time, so he is one of those golden age writers. Yeah, they're not the best at fleshing out character, and I think they are almost more comfortable in a kind of, there's a lot of short stories and stuff from these guys. But yeah, well, we're all products of our times, I suppose, and our locuses, but we can shift off things. Yeah, but it's that jump of science and its push into the public perception, I suppose, that really science fiction is starting to get a grip. And it did have it in the I suppose, in the Victorian era with books like, Frankenstein and Dracula and things like that. Have I seen the new Foundation series on Apple TV? No, Ether, I don't have no Apple products here. Sadly, it's one of the really just naff things about living in the modern world is that we have to pay for a TV license in this country, which is an absolute disgrace. what could pay for 5 or 6 different hosting streaming services, we have to throw to the government sort of propaganda channel, which is the BBC. We just caught one of our presenters here getting schooled on the TV the other day because there's a problem in this country about how people refer to the city of Derry or Londonderry or whatever you want to call it. And it was he's like our chat show, kind of main chat show, bit of a shock jock guy. Is called Nolan, and so he's supposed to refer to the city as in a certain way to a caller, and he didn't. And then the caller took him up on it, and simply put, he was brought up on it, and he's following BBC guidance. So this is actually, in terms of Northern Ireland, this is kind of bad because there's a thing here about how the BBC can report here based on how they can work from mainland Britain, and it's called reference upwards. And I thought it was a thing of the past, and this happened yesterday. This man gets paid £400,000 a year to drink an awful lot of prosecco, look very unhealthy, shout at people, and tell them how they should pronounce or what name they should use for where they live. But we've got a lot of that sort of nonsense over here. And the BBC suck, right, folks? We're on a science fiction channel, so the BBC suck like only a black hole can. There you go. That's as vehement as I'll get. But I don't like the BBC anymore. It used to be a great thing, and it's not competing at all in a global market. Brad says the writer that got at me was Ray Bradbury. Excuse me. Some of his stories were so good, others came across to me as him showing off the words he knows. Yeah. A writer who's kind of in that sort of mode is very, very good, but can be very verbose and is Will Self. I think you'll get an education from Will. If anybody reads any Will Self, have a look at him. You'll learn a lot of words by the time you get through either one of his books, or even just if you bumped into had a conversation with the man. I think you'd come out having a greatly increased vocabulary. Great Apes is one of his, I think. I have an actual question for you. It says either, is Frank Herbert your favourite author? If not him, then no. Oh, sorry, then who? Well, no is the answer. He's not my favourite author. And a lot of people think, oh my God, what's it? A big part of my life is Frank Herbert. And I mean a major part of my life, 5-6 years dedicated to working on this man's work. So he's not my favourite author, no. And it's hard to talk about favourites, isn't it? What you favour doesn't necessarily mean it's the great. I don't like the greatest or the best. You know, one of these things where we talk about it's the greatest of all time. Sorry, folks, I just realised my microphone, I didn't bring it down. Can you hear me okay? It should be way, way down here. Is that maybe a wee bit better? Maybe you've had a hard time hearing me tonight. But it's normally down here, just out of sight. Let's see. I don't know if I have a favourite author. Either. And I don't even know if my favourite author would be a science fiction author, to be honest with you. I'm just trying to think of what's the book that I reread the most. What's the book that that's a bit better, but you were fine. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. It's not even quite. I just didn't want to go. There we go. That's where we should be. Sorry about that, folks. Totally forgot about that. Hopefully that's okay. Let me see, back to the question. So a favourite author? Well, of recent years it would have been Ian M. Banks, I suppose. But I suppose a lot of stuff that I reread again, you're a bit echoey before. Thank you. I kind of know exactly where to put things for everything to be all right, and I just had forgot to do that. Do apologise, everybody. Excuse me, you probably all got me cranked up there. A lot of stuff I like tends to be by Anonymous is probably my favourite author. If that's a really dodgy answer. But Ian M. Banks in recent years, I have favourites, if you like. And it depends on if I'm reading. See, there's some people that I wouldn't read their books again, but I think their writing is supreme. But that's enough for me. I'm only going to read that once. Mervyn Peake would be like that. I think Mervyn Peake's an incredible writer. Ray Bradbury for me, Brad as well. A lot of his, I've got a bunch of his short stories and stuff down here. Uh, Really, the ones that the Martian Chronicles, Fahrenheit 451, and the Illustrated Man in particular. Yeah, Ray Bradbury. I thought was huge in America. I mean, I got the sense that he was massive, and he tends to be not included in certain cadres of writers because I think he's kind of seen as a modern. It's like a modern American Gothic. But I'd argue massive influence on the likes of Stephen King and possibly Richard Matheson. I'm not too sure about their dates, but I know Richard Matheson's a big influence on Stephen King. Stephen King's one of those authors that I don't really read much of at all. But I really like Alfred Bester. Philip K. Dick. You got me. Sorry, I had to think of it. Who's my favorite author? Who's the one author that I get most pleasure that makes me think the most, that has made me examine my own life and the world around me? It's Philip K. Dick. But there you go. Favorite writer or director? I do have a favorite film, by the way. And as much as what I was just saying, I've always said that I kind of have 5 films that are around what you might. A few people do these lists. I don't really like it, but it's just that those films seldom change. If you were to ask me, what films do you truly love? But my favorite film is Excalibur by John Borman. From my point of view, it's a perfect film. It's perfection. It's as close to perfection as you can get. Yes, I love I don't call them, I mean, as much as they're published in magazines like that, I don't consider them pulp authors. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard. I'm a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. That's the kind of horror I like, by the way. So is that kind of Victorian stuff, the stuff like Sheridan Le Fanu and Stoker. That's my kind of type of horror, and I love Lovecraft as well. But see, modern, nope, don't like it at all. Vampire, it's just vampire books, werewolf books, zombie books. That kind of, not interested at all. But no, I love. We're going to do some stuff with Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and those guys, and Edgar Rice Burroughs as well. I think they're all great, and I think they're very good writers. Pulp means generally that your work's getting pulped. It's mush. It's not good enough to sell. I think reselling and that. So no, I have some lovely editions of these guys' books, and Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft, and have no bother selling books today. It's a pity, isn't it? A pity. It's like a lot of great artists that they don't really do that well from it in their time. So I don't know. What were my feelings? Brad says, "Sorry, Brad, I missed your comment. What were my feelings on the Jodorowsky film, or non-film, as it were?" I watched the documentary and quite enjoyed it from a kind of artwork point of view. I think Jodorowsky's I think he's a wheel short of a unicycle. Does that make sense? That's about the best as a good a metaphor as I could think there. Or a simile, sorry, but he's yeah, I think he's not 100% there. He's a bit eccentric, isn't he? Like myself, I suppose I get called that kind of thing. Good night, son. So there's my son saying good night there. Clive Barker. I did read a wee bit of Clive Barker in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, early 90s. Brad, I remember reading Clive Barker at school, and I do like Hellraiser. Excuse me, I've read Hellraiser the first, and is it a wee short story or no? What is it? I can't remember actually. It's that long ago, but I remember reading it in 1991. I would have been in lower 6 at school, so somebody lent it to me. Oh no, it was Weave World. Sorry, Weave World. That was it, I think. But yeah, I quite like the Hellraiser films. I like the first 3. I know they're not, I think they're going to be a bit silly. But in fact, I quite like them all. Quite like his sensibilities. But again, I don't read. I used to read a bit of Brian Lumley at that time. There was books called Necroscope, I think. But that would be at the same time I read that I read Carrying Comfort by Dan Simmons. So all of that kind of stuff was around. Let's have a wee look. So yeah. But yeah, the Jodorowsky film, Brad, by the way, I think if Jodorowsky got to make a Dune film, I think it would have been absolutely appalling. I think he would have had to gone into hiding from Dune fans. I think they would have hated him for it. And really, because I got the sense that he was going to make a Dune go, here's the book, I've sod it. I really got that sense. I don't care. I'm going to make up my own thing. And I got the sense that he was going to be very disrespectful to the source material. And as much as it's fun, and I think even whenever the new film came out, they were asking him what he thought of it. That's going to be rubbish. That just naysaying and just putting down other people's work. As much as you'll hear me chat, I get asked about a few things and stuff, and I do my best not to put people down or their work. If it depends on the intent behind it, but I try to look for the best in things, if you see what I mean. Let me just catch up with your comments there. Ether says, which of these authors do you think has an interesting take on the themes of the hero's journey, monomyth, tonight's topic? Jung, etc. And yes, I love Philip K. Dick too. Yeah. Well, I think I think the idea of the monomyth, this systemic approach to looking at this, I think it's badly flawed, because I think you can take any. Oh yeah, the hero has to go on a journey. Really? What, you mean he's not going to sit there, not move, and be static? If you break the logic of it down to it, we all go on a journey in any kind of sense. So I understand what you're saying, the different themes of the hero's journey, the separation, the initiation, they're just steps on the journey. And if really looking back at all this kind of mythological literature, mythology, etc., and we have a lot of this kind of stuff prior to Campbell's writing this. You talk about the influence of Dostoyevsky and Nietzsche on Jung, etc. You can see that kind of thing, that nihilistic view within Conan. A lot of people call Conan a Nietzschean kind of masterman and this kind of thing. I disagree entirely. I think what they get that is that I suppose maybe Conan is nihilistic sometimes, because my sense from reading through the stories we're up to at the minute is that sometimes when he faces something that's kind of like a god or something like that, Conan's kind of, I'm not going to be able to beat that, but he's accepting of his own death generally and just pulls out the sword and flies in there anyway. He gives it his all, I think, and regardless, he's going to go down being true to himself. I think that's what's interesting about Conan. But do you think has an interesting take? I think all of them have an interesting take on these themes. Ether, as a person who loves mythology, I always find it interesting to look at how other people approach it. But particularly within the psychoanalytical psychology world, I think all approaches to myth there are flawed badly. And it's a bit like what we talk about. If your initial conditions are wrong, you'll get chaos. Things will spiral out of control. You'll get all sorts of reiterations and stuff. But it is interesting to see the same sort of thing. I think Jordan Peterson's the main kind of celebrity psychologist of the moment, isn't he? Or a psychoanalyst. And again, no doubt that you'll find a ridiculous amount of mythology being talked about. Let's just catch up. Lily says that Helen Mirren was awesome in Excalibur. She's brilliant in it, absolutely brilliant in it. Again, quite young when I watched it. It was the first sort of film where I think I knew. Well, I think we've seen her in the Long Good Friday, I think, haven't we? I'm not sure if that was out before that, but yeah, she's exceptionally good in it. The whole film's amazing. I love it. Beautiful film, beautiful to look at. Just everything about it. And talk about something having its heart, truly its heart in the right place. Brad, we've had a few discussions about the Holy Mountain before. So somebody was talking to me about the use of psychedelics and stuff earlier, but I sort of said, I suppose I didn't mention this, but I'll sort of say I was in London in the 90s, and what was the saying, that whenever we get out of the 80s, the 90s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s. So that was kind of going on. So I have seen Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain, and I've seen another one of his films as well. I watched both of them at the same time, and I cannot tell you a thing about them. So it's part of my youth in the early 90s, but uh, it was an esoteric experience, should we put it that way? So I can't separate really what I saw in those films from anything else that happened that evening. I think if that is a good enough explanation, Brad. But I suppose I'll have. I put it this way. I've caught glimpses of them since, and I could have sat and watched them, and I didn't have any kind of real notion to. And I don't know if that comes back from some kind of deep seated memory of watching them the first time. Actually, I read that Lovecraft was nihilistic, and he and Howard fundamentally disagreed on this topic. I couldn't remember about that. That's a good detail, Ether, if it's true. I can't remember. Well, you could imagine Lovecraft being nihilistic, sorry, and the same with Howard. You know, we were just talking about that kind of concept with Conan, but I don't know. There's something about the exchange letters on the subject, yeah. Well, so that you're saying that Howard wasn't nihilistic, and that Lovecraft was. Is that the gist of it, Ether? Nihilism. You believe in nothing. I think it's silly to believe in nothing when there's plenty of things around you, but if you see what I mean. But I tend to think it was more fatalistic, I think, but Howard was not and Lovecraft was. Yeah. But I mean, you get whenever you get the sense of, I suppose that's the kind of point about the whole Lovecraftian thing, is that these things are on a scale beyond us. We're microbes to these things. It's, you know, it's an interesting, again, the scale of life. There is a scale to life, scale to evolution as well, if you think about it. But yeah, I very much kind of would like to get back into it. I've been reading, Ether, I was talking about how I'd never really been able to get a lot of these books. You get a one here, one there, if you see what I mean. So I have these two very nice it's the complete Robert E. Howard's Conans, and I'm about a third of the way through it, I think, at the minute. And I've got three set. I read a lot of books at once, but I've been working my way slowly through them. So one night I might grab a Robert E. Howard Conan next. I've been working through the Lovecraft Cthulhu stories as well. And well, I meant to show you, by the way. The other thing that I kind of been reading for a while is, we were talking about it. There we go. I'm on volume 3 of this collect. That's the 1,000 Nights and One Night, the Arabian Nights, as you would know. And I'm kind of reading it one a night. Well, it's not quite how it works. That was the intent, but I've where am I at now? I've got the Tale of Pomegranate Flower and Badr Basim. Sorry. Really enjoying that. That's great. I'll tell you something. If you read Dune, if you're a person like me and you could read a bit of this and then pick up Dune and feel like you hadn't skipped a page. There's a lot of the Arabian Nights, I think, in Dune. You know, Conan was not a nihilist. He's deeply humanist. He believed that man could overcome any challenge using his wits or strength. Yeah, as I said, the only thing I got from that is in that moment where that's where I think that impression of Conan comes from. Is it that moment in the stories where it's, but he really just, well, hey, let's give it your all. I think wits or strength. I think Conan again. The idea of Conan is that he's stupid is hugely incorrect. Very clever. Well, you know, his thought process in the books is pretty clever. He's a good character, yeah. So there we go, folks. Well, listen, I'll tell you what. As usual, we're just hitting the midnight hour here. My son's got to get up for work tomorrow, so I'll just run through a couple more of your comments here that have popped up, and we'll call it a night, folks. But Chris says, I think Excalibur was filmed in the same part of Ireland as Zardoz. I believe so. Anyone who enjoyed Excalibur's visuals could do worse than watch Terry English make Adam Savage Arthur's armor. It's on YouTube. Oh wow, yeah, the armor's brilliant. I mean, that was all. Yeah, you can tell when they're burnt. You know, it's very clever. I would add, by the way, guys, if you like that we were talking about very quickly. All the dogs are barking. We were talking about the film The Green Knight. I believe, Chris, is also filmed. It's filmed in Ireland. And in terms of a film that would sit comfortably next to Excalibur in Arthurian canon, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but they would go well together. If anybody hasn't seen The Green Knight, which is just out starring Dev Patel, check it out. It's really good. It's on Amazon at the minute, I think. Really good film. A couple of hours long. If you've got good atmosphere film, if you want to sit in the dark and late at night, with the popcorn, just watch. Really, really good. But anyway, folks, thank you very much for all your comments and time tonight. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. Ether just saying he was very clever about Conan, and cheers, mate, and have a great night. See you tomorrow. Yeah, everybody, thank you very much for joining us. Tomorrow night, on we go with The Hero's Journey, the Monomyth, Joseph Campbell, and how that applies to Frank Herbert's Dune series. And then we begin the real examination of the hero topic within Frank Herbert's Dune series. So, as I said, folks, we'll see you the next time. Hopefully you can join me tomorrow night. Thanks very much. Look after yourselves wherever you are and take care. All the very best now, and good night. See you later, folks.